Cynabal was the first pirate faction cruiser that I was actively using in PvP. Before the Cynabal I was flying the Phantasm, although the Phantasm was mostly a PvE ship. Now, at the time I had about 10 of these ships just laying around, and at the time they were about 2.5 or 1.8 billion. Now the price is a lot cheaper. Now let's take a quick look at the ship trait description. Now this is a angel ship. They have the same roll bonus, extra warp speed, extra warp acceleration and damage control activation time. And the Cynabal has a very similar bonus to the Macarial. You get extra cannon rate of fire damage and extra tracking as well as accuracy, which makes the Cynabal a very nice little DPS ship. Now the Cynabal has 1 drone, 5 high slots, 3 medium slots, 5 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. The defense is 23,000. The Cynabal can be both a shield or armor tank, depends on what skills you have for the ship. The capacitor is 3002 gigajoules, which is okay. The recharge time and recharge rate is also okay. Now the signature radius of this ship is very small for its size. The Cynabal is about 130 meters long and its signature is only 70 meters. And I believe this is the smallest signature out of any faction cruiser. And of course, the Cynabal is very fast, although not the fastest cruiser. The Stabber 2 is actually a little bit faster than the Cynabal, although this thing is also really fast with the afterburner or micro warp drive. Now, on to the build. So I see that I'm lacking 2 gyro stabilizers, so let me quickly borrow them from the Macarial. It's interesting that the Macarial is not the fastest faction battleship, it's the Nestor. Although when we take a look at the Stratios speed, that is the slowest faction cruiser in the game. Now, a little fun fact. Sister of Eve has the slowest faction cruiser, but they have the fastest faction battleship. The Stratios barely achieves 1 km per second, while the Nestor can easily hit 3.5 km per second. Okay, now let me quickly place the gyro stabilizers in the Cynabal. Now this is basically the build that I like to use when I go and hunt with the Cynabal. Works well if solo, works well in a fleet. Overall you rely on the gyro stabilizers and on the DPS to kill the target as quickly as possible. And the damage control is there just in case if you start taking serious damage. It does give you enough time to warp out if necessary. I have dual webs, 1 scrambler, sometimes dual scramblers and a single web, depends on the target. And in the rigs I have triple burst aerators, and in the engineering rigs you can place warp core stabs, auxiliary thrusters, capacitor rigs, targeting rigs, depends on what you need to use on the ship. Now the tank, of course, is not looking the best. That is because I only have 1 damage control. But let me undock and let me show you how the active stats look on this ship. Now, one thing that I changed on my Barrage Implant, I did pull out the old level 8 units, and I think I sold them because I don't use the Barrage Implant that often, so the Barrage DPS will be significantly lower now. 2.5 km per second is the micro warp drive speed. It can be increased. I have warp core stabs on this ship, so that's why the speed is not that good, although it's still not bad. And I don't have a nanocore on the Cynabal, although you can use nanocores on this ship. They're helpful and they're very nice, but I keep this ship as cheap as possible, and honestly I don't really need to use nanocores, so already doing pretty well even without the nanocores, so I think I will keep the ship in this way. And with all 3 gyro stabilizers active, 1.9 thousand, and with the Barrage Implant it's 2.6 thousand. This can go a lot higher, although again I did change the general units, so I did reduce my own DPS. After all, I don't use the Barrage Implant that often anymore, so don't really have to run the super expensive units. But if you like the Cynabal, you can use the Barrage Implant, it does work well. However, I would like to add that I noticed the Barrage Implant working better on battleships than on cruisers, because the Barrage Implant does reduce your optimal range and you really have to be close to the target in order to apply the damage. Now this is a more tank focused build, 150 DPS, which is still pretty nice. Dual adaptives, one large booster, one damage control and one micro obdrive. In the medium slots, one scrambler, one Nosferatu and one web. Now if I go with a tank build, I like to swap the micro obdrive into an afterburner. That way I have more capacitor and I can easily maintain a decent velocity even when scrambled. So if you like to brawl with the Cynabal, a afterburner is the good choice. Now if you change the rigs into power grid rigs, you could technically place a large Nosferatu in the ship. So that's one way to get a really solid tank out of this ship. However, with my current build, I can't really use a large Nosferatu. Even if I go and use a cheaper booster, I still don't have enough power to fit the large Nosferatu in the Cynabal. And if you like to use an active tank, this combination would actually be really good, and it's really easily doable if you change the rigs into power grid rigs. That way you will make a very nice tank with the Cynabal.
Undocking.
Okay, let me undock and let me show you the active stats. Now there is a lot of other ways how to build the Cynabal. You can also focus on a tank build. You can focus on a mix between tank and DPS. You can even use rig integrations, but I like to keep my Cynabal cheap and I primarily use this ship with high DPS, although having a mix between DPS and tank is actually a really good idea on this ship. 51,000 hit points, 64, 68, 76 and 80% resistance, and with the damage control it's 153,000, 88, 89, 92 and 95% resistance, which honestly is pretty good, because after all my rigs are not tank rigs and this should last a long time in a fight. 1.1 km per second is the afterburner speed on the Cynabal. Okay, now you can replace the damage control into a capacitor battery. Works well if you are using the large booster. Would work even better if the rigs are for tank. Okay, I have this capacitor battery. Now the capacitor has been increased a little bit, and of course the performance of the modules, boosters, Nosferatus and all the modules can be improved by the usage of the general units. So you can even further improve the capacitor, the tank or the shield booster capacitor usage. Again, it depends on what kind of Cynabal you want to build. Now I'm trying to fit a large battery here, but that's not going to work. You can fit a large battery if you sacrifice the engineering rigs for power grid. The Cynabal has a lot of power grids by default, and you can easily take advantage of that. You can even use a large neutralizer and a large capacitor battery. There is honestly a lot of ways how to build the ship, and today you will see some of them. And of course, I really hope that the builds here do inspire you to create a very good build without the... Oh, what is this? Okay, never mind. For a second I thought that I managed to fit the large battery and large booster, but Unfortunately, I will have to change the rigs if I want to do that. Now let me undock and let me show you the active stats on this ship. Now, I usually prefer to run the Cynabal or Macarial with the damage control because, well, it does give you a lot of extra tank and it does last for extra 5 seconds, and every second is valuable. Well, the stats definitely look a little bit better, however the tank is a little bit lower because, well, the damage control does give you 8.80% passive resistance. Now, one build I see very often is the passive shield tank Cynabal, and honestly I do like this setup. It does make the ship very tanky. Can even go a step beyond and put tank rigs on this build, basically to cover the resistance holes, and you get a very tanky cruiser. Now you can use a large neutralizer with this build, however that would require to change the engineering rigs a little bit, and well, 17,000 in shield, which is really nice. Now let me undock and let me show you the active stats.
Undocking.
This build works well with a micro-obdrive or afterburner, although I personally prefer to use an afterburner, but you can use a micro-obdrive as well because it does work very nicely. 73,000 hit points, 64, 68, 78 and 80% resistance. And of course, let's not forget, you can activate damage control, which does give you 18 seconds of, I would say, near immortality, 88, 89, 92 and 93%, 2018 hit points. And with the extended active, you get a 43-45% increase in shield, which also does work as a panic button, so you can use the damage control and extender combination when needed. Now this build is something that I run on the Starberry too sometimes, basically one large and one medium extender. Now I have 20,000 in shield.
Undocking.
However, with this build you will have a little bit less resistances, and in order to make it work a little bit better, I would be changing the rigs into the tank rigs, and that would improve the resistance quite a bit. 63,000, so it is lower than the previous build, 48, 54, 63 and 73% resistance. Let's use the afterburner. The speed will be about the same.
Docking.
And this is also one of the builds that I did use. Now the Cynabal can be a very good armor tank. This is the build with dual adaptives, one large repairer, damage control and an afterburner. Now the armor tank is going to be working a little bit differently. It will be very easy on the capacitor, but I will still use a Nosferatu because this is a large repairer after all. And I have the thermal circulation implant active because the thermal implant does give you extra 20% resistances, which does work like another adaptive permanently running on your ship. So this is the thermal circulation over here. Let's take a look at the implant stats. The level 15 secondary is going to give you extra 20% armor, and this works well on all armor tank ships. However, you will sacrifice the DPS because you will not have the barrage implant active, but you get a very nice armor tank. And with armor tank rigs, the Cynabal can be very deadly. And of course we have the damage control and the armor repairer. So all that combined, and the Cynabal is actually a pretty good armor tank. 94, 92, 90 and 89% resistance. With an armor tank, this would be about 94% on average, so yeah,
Docking request.
you can make this thing very, very tanky. Now, a lot of players like to use dual medium armor repairs instead of one large armor repair, and mostly because you can use some other modules like Nosferatus, neutralizers, without sacrificing the engineering rigs for extra power grid, because with this current build I'm not able to fit any medium Nosferatu. Armor repairs use a lot more power grid than shield boosters. That's why I don't have enough power grid to use any other module. So in order to fix this, you can use the power grid rigs, or you can simply go and change the C-type into a faction armor repair. Now this is a build with dual medium armor repairs, and with this build I can use one large Nosferatu. Now there is a lot of advantages in using dual armor repairs, and also a disadvantage. The lack of the damage control, for example, is one disadvantage. But you get a pretty capacitor stable ship, and you still have pretty good armor resistances.
Warp drive active.
And if you have the thermal circulation implant, that is going to help even more. Okay, let's take the Cynabal out for a little ride. Now, how does the Cynabal work in missions? Can you do the tier 10 high sec missions with a cruiser? And the answer is yes, you can. The Cynabal has really good DPS. In some cases, the DPS on the Cynabal is going to be comparable to the DPS of a battleship, so the clear time will be pretty good. Now, the Barrage Implant is pretty good on battleships for PvP. However, on cruisers I noticed that you really have to be close, and you have to slow down your ship in order to be able to track the target. And I would say that's basically the main issue with the Barrage Implant on the Cynabal. However, when you do start applying damage, and when the ship does start hitting the target, it does do a lot of damage. So I would say, if you like to fly the Cynabal, then go with the Barrage Implant. I personally did use it for a very long time. Nowadays I just go full tank, so I don't really have the need to run the Barrage Implant that often. As for the general units, I did go with the gyro stabilizer units to improve the damage output. However, there are going to be some drawbacks. For example, it will reduce the activation time, and it will increase the cooldown. So basically, for PvP, for short hit and run operations, this build is going to work really well. That's how I did use my Cynabal. Now, keep in mind that you have high DPS, so most targets will probably die very quick. However, there are going to be ships that can easily counter a DPS build, and you have to be careful around those ships, because even with the Barrage Implant, a good fit, a good tank will easily withstand your DPS long enough so that your modules go on cooldown, and when you lose your DPS, then it's probably going to be time to warp out, and if you can't warp out, then you risk losing your ship. Now, my usual targets with the Cynabal are cruisers, faction cruisers, battle cruisers. In rare occasions I do attack battleships. However, most of my targets are cruisers and battle cruisers. That's the target goal with my Cynabal. Now, back in the day, I did run a build that is very similar to this one. We can even run a dual propulsion fit. I found out that a dual propulsion Cynabal is actually really good. If I had the dual propulsion build on my old Cynabal, it would probably be still alive, but unfortunately I didn't have that, so the Cynabal did go down against a Raven a long time ago, which is okay. For solo runs, the dual propulsion Cynabal is very good, because with the micro updraft you can tackle, and with the afterburner you can easily speed tank the targets. Now for high stack missions you don't really need a lot of tank. However, I would not be using warp core stabs for missions, so if you plan to use a Cynabal for missions, then focus on auxiliary thrusters or capacitor rigs, or even targeting rigs, depends what you prefer, depends on what you need. The capacitor rigs are good if you want to maintain a stable capacitor with the armor repair or shield booster. The auxiliary thrusters are good if you want to speed tank your targets, and the targeting rigs are good if you want to lock on the targets faster.
Enemy ships detected.
However, warp core stabs can help to warp out from nasty situations, and in low sec you can use warp core stabs, I guess. However, using the auxiliary thrusters is also a pretty good idea, because the Cynabal is already pretty fast and you can easily take advantage of its speed. Surprisingly, in low sec you can use a dual propulsion Cynabal for missions as well. You can easily burn away from one tackle ship that is trying to tackle your Cynabal. By tackle ship I usually mean a pirate. So there is really hundreds of ways on how to fit this ship. Now, I remember when the Cynabal was classified as the weakest faction cruiser, and also I remember when the Ashimo was classified as the best. That is mostly because the Cynabal doesn't really have anything that is going to stand out too much. You get excellent warp speed and acceleration and damage control, but the Ashimo does get Web and Nosferatu as well as neutralizer bonus. The Vigilant does get extra web strength and point range. The Ortus has a similar stat to the Vigilant, however the Ortus has a lot of scramblers, a lot of points and things like that. So at the time the Cynabal was classified as the weakest faction cruiser, but that did not stop me from flying it. I had a blast with this ship. Now nowadays I don't really fly the Cynabal that often, and not because it's a bad ship, far from that, but just because I was focused on some other things. As you all know, I'm currently saving up for a faction dreadnought that is going to be released probably in the near future, but I really hope it's not that near, because I still need a lot of ISK. So I'm trying to save on ISK on all fronts possible, and so far I would say I'm doing a pretty good job with that. And that's why I keep my ships very cheap. Honestly, I remember when my Cynabal was very expensive and it did well, but I did reduce the price, and I stopped using very expensive modules for a very long time now, and the ship still performs really well. In some cases I would say it performs better than it used to. That's because skills help a lot, and as I mentioned before, I'm really satisfied with the Cynabal. And yes, I use this ship for PvP without an nanocore. In some cases, up until recently, I actually had a Mark 9 micro object, so this was a very cheap ship. I think the insurance price was like 750 million or something like that. Was something really cheap. One of the cheapest faction cruisers that I've ever seen, and yeah, so far it did work really well, and it probably will continue to work really well. Not really sure what's the next cruiser that I will fly. I mean, I will fly the Cynabal, that's for sure, because I kinda miss flying this ship, mostly because of nostalgic reasons. I remember when I used to run from high sec to null sec in our old home, was using this ship, and this ship is the first faction cruiser that I bought after I lost the Phantasm. My Phantasm loss is one of the most expensive ones. At the time, the Phantasm was classified as super expensive. Also, like how the builds changed over time. I used a very bad build on the Phantasm, now when I take a look at it.
We're under attack.
Basically, I learned to PvP on the Cynabal and on the RB. I really enjoyed flying this thing back in the day. I still do enjoy flying it.
We're under attack.
And with the implants, with the Barrage implant, the Cynabal became a lot more lethal, so that's also one interesting thing. However, I will still say that the Barrage implant works better on big cannons, because they already have a lot of range, while the small cannons require it to be very close. After the Cynabal, I will take a ride in the Dramiel, just to see how the Barrage implant works on the smaller ships. Will be fun. Now the PvE performance is okay, I would say it's pretty good. Can easily run missions with this ship. However, I feel like faction cruisers
Warning.
are
Capacitor
ideal
running low.
for storyline missions. The small signatures on the Cynabal does allow you to create a ship that basically cannot be scanned, or if someone tries to scan you, you will get a alert, so you can easily warp out. There is the anti-scan Dramiel. You can also build a anti-scan Cynabal. Angel ships in general have a very small signature radius, and you can easily use that to counter the pirates in sec by building a ship that's focused on anti-scan.
Warning.
Now, what does
Capacitor running
anti-scan mean?
low.
Well, if someone clicks on a scanner, you will be basically notified, and if you get notified, you can easily warp out, and that way you can avoid the pirates, and you can easily warp out if they decide to go and attack you in your mission. Now, in my case, I don't use those rigs because I am usually the pilot who is doing the scanning and the tackling. However, there's a lot of ways on how to avoid pirates in low sec.
Warning. Capacitor
In most cases,
running low.
you can't do that with a battleship, you can't do that with a battlecruiser, but it's easily doable in a cruiser, in a frigate, and I think I will show you how to do that. You can easily run the tier 10 storylines with a Cynabal, although a Phantasm might be,
Capacitor running low.
in some cases, I guess, a better choice, but in the end it really does depend on what kind of skills you have on your ship. Okay, well, this is the last ship of the mission. Could have been faster if I did use the right general units. Nowadays I focus my general units on tank, started to use less and less DPS for some reason. Mostly probably because I was flying the Revelation a lot and I just did fit that thing for full tank. However, I started to do the same on the Macarial, and I do basically the same on the other cruisers that I fly, and as well as some other ships that you will see very soon. But overall, in the end, you can build the ship and you can use the units that you think would work best for your ship, as long as you don't do a hybrid tank. It should be good. Remember, never do a hybrid tank. Never mix shield and armor. That's just not good. That's just bad. That's just very, very bad. So don't mix tanks on your ship. Okay, well, that was a very, I would say, a very chill ride, very chill mission. Very happy with the Cynabal performance. Overall, the Cynabal remains one of the best cruisers that I ever used, and is still one of the most fun to fly ships that is available in the game. Can't wait for the, let's say, tier 2 cruisers, tier 3 cruisers, like the Vagabond, Loki, or other things like that. You know what I'm talking about. When they are released, I'm definitely going to be flying them. And with that being said, hope that you enjoyed, hope that this video could help you to build your own Cynabal. And with that being said, hope you enjoyed, stay safe, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.